Hello and welcome everybody to this webinar on the next stage of growth for goimagine. I'm coming to you live in hopes to tell you more about what we have going on at goimagine, what we've been working on, all the things that have been happening in general as we continue to grow our marketplace that cares. I'll do my best to make this short. I don't want to take too much of your time today. My plan is to start coming live monthly going forward to do Q&A, but also updates as we build the company and things that are going on. And quite frankly, it's been too long. It's been a while since I've come live to our community to really talk about everything we've been working on. So I thought this would be a good time to jump in. First thing I'll tell you is that I am coming to you live from our new office. Yeah, we actually have an office for goimagine right now. Up until now, I've been working out of my house. I think most people during the pandemic were working out of their home, and I'm finally venturing out. We were able to get an office. I'll give you a quick tour. Here are my windows. You'll see we're actually in the Arts District in Worcester, Massachusetts. So there's a lot of arts over here. Arts Worcester is actually downstairs from us. We have a maker studio that is upstairs that I plan on giving you guys a tour of eventually. We're actually going to be doing events hopefully with them. Yeah, I mean, and there we go. There's my my little puppet over there. So we're really excited. Steph, who you know, will be coming into the office as well occasionally to work out of here. And we've got a little room to expand too as we maybe hire a couple more people. So very excited about our new office. More so, I'm very excited that I can get away from my children and work once in a while. For those who don't know too much about me, I've got 4 children, including twin 4-year-olds. And my toddlers don't really understand often that daddy's working when I am working. So now I can work a little bit more in peace, especially now that the summer's coming and they're all home. So where do we want to go from here? What do I want to talk about? So let's start with the basics. And that's the fact that, we have a lot of new makers that are already joining us. So for those makers that have been around since the beginning, you might hear some things I've talked about before, but I always want to welcome and introduce myself to all the new makers who have joined us in recent months. And my name is Jon Lincoln. I am the founder of goimagine. And this has been going on. We've started this we launched, about 20 months ago. So it's less than 2 years old, been about 2.5 years working with our maker community to build the platform. And very excited about where things are headed, and also have challenges and hurdles we have to jump along the way, as you can imagine with any startup company. So to start, let's talk about why we exist, and not only why we exist, but how we're doing the reason we exist. Well, the first thing is, why do we exist? Well, the main goal for goimagine has always been to build a more caring economy, and building a more caring economy through developing a marketplace focused on social good. Now, what do we mean by that? When I say a marketplace focused on social good, it's the idea of creating a meeting place online where buyers and sellers can transact like they can anywhere, but the transaction fees and the profits that are built from the marketplace engine are going to good causes and charities, in our case, children's charities, instead of just focusing on the more Wall Street investor route that most tech marketplaces focus on. So that is the original concept, as a marketplace focused on social good. Now, how are we doing it? We're doing it through makers and artists. We have created this handmade marketplace to help makers and artists build their business, while together we build a platform that is helping children in need. That is the aim of goimagine. And the big dream is that not only are we going to prove that a marketplace focused on social good can help, can succeed, I should say, but others can follow. We can prove a model that while we're focusing on handmade and makers and artists working together in the world to help children in need, there could be future marketplaces that follow the same model that we're doing now. Right? The same exact thing. While we are connecting makers and artists with buyers of handmade, someone in the future can create an Airbnb that is simply connecting people who are looking to rent out their homes to people who want to rent those homes. And in that transaction, money can go to charity, because that's the beauty of a marketplace. It's the network effect that makes it grow so exponential. And quite frankly, That's why Wall Street is in love with marketplaces. It's because once they're at scale and that flywheel effect starts going, they become so big, right? So together, whether you know it or not, you are helping this mission grow as we get out there and prove the mission. Now, before I jump into some of the things we've been thinking about lately, I do want to rewind to something I talked about, I don't know, a year and a half ago with our community. And that's the technology adoption curve. Now, I don't want to get all tech nerdy on you here. I know that many of you, being makers and artists, are not as software and tech focused as I am. My path, my background has always been technology for the past decade plus. But there's something I do want to introduce to you that many of you have not heard before, which is the technology adoption curve, which a lot of people call crossing the chasm, and how you see technology gets adopted from the early stages of just a seed business up until when a technology is to the masses and everybody's buying it. And specifically something called crossing the chasm. So I have this chart up here right now, and the technology adoption curve is like any bell curve you've seen in the past. And it always starts the same way, regardless of the technology, whether it was the iPhone, whether it was Facebook, whether it was Etsy, whether it was Apple and the PC computer. It could be anything. They all start the same way. And they always start at the early stage here with what you would call the innovators. The innovators are those consumers, the buyers that just want the new thing. They're the ones that are out in line for the new iPhone, regardless of the fact they know it's buggy and it's brand new and it's probably a little glitchy because they haven't worked out all the bugs yet. The innovators are the ones that just love the mission of a company, and they're getting on board early, knowing that the company is still refining what they're doing and figuring it out as they go, like every company does. Early adopters come in soon after the innovators. And these early adopters are the ones that now the company is a little bit getting known. But a lot of the customers are willing to give it a shot, even though they're not big yet, right? So the early adopters are the ones that are saying, you know what, this looks like a good thing. I'm going to try it, knowing that it's not mainstream. A lot of people haven't heard about it yet. Maybe I'm getting scammed. I don't know. I'm going to try it anyway, right? So the stage that goimagine, I believe, is in right now is in this early stage. It's only been a couple of years, and we are in the innovators and early adopter stage of our company. And we've got, I've got a dollar sign there. You can ignore that dollar sign. It's supposed to say 3,000 plus makers. So we currently have over 3,000 makers on our site. And the vast majority of those early makers with us are those early adopters and those innovators that are really seeing the vision of goimagine. They're the ones, I should say, you're the ones, are the ones that see that we're trying to do something different. We're trying to create a better world online. And even though we're new, even though the product isn't fully done because there's still things we want to build on it and we got to mature more and all that stuff, those are the early makers that are coming on board to help us grow, right? Now, eventually, as you become more mainstream, you get to the what is called the early majority and late majority. This is where you see a company start to grow exponentially. It's the companies where you're like, out of nowhere, everybody knows about it. And the time it takes to get there is different for different companies, right? If you look at the Instagrams of the world, it happened in a couple of years. But if you look at the Etsys of the world, Etsy really didn't go mainstream until maybe 7 years into their business, right? Even for those who were with Etsy early on and were getting sales and loving Etsy, the general population wasn't really knowing Etsy until they were maybe 5 years in, 6 years in, something like that. Now, how you approach bringing on early and the early majority of consumers, people who are buying your product, that's when the product is more mature. What I mean by more mature is all the bugs are fleshed out. It's very modern. You figured out your entire method for the product, and whether this is a hardware product like an iPhone, or whether it's a software product like a marketplace. At the end of the day, when you hit the early majorities, when you've really figured everything out, and you're just scaling at that point. But the early majority, that this group I'm showing right here, they're not the ones that are in it for the mission, right? They're in it for what they're getting out of it. They want the product that's done, it's tested, it works. They don't want to deal with the bugs, right? So the chasm, which I wanted to bring up here, is where I think we're approaching, right? The chasm is that point between how you market and work with the innovators and the early adopters who are part of the mission and part of the team, essentially, versus how you market and how you work with that majority of people coming on board. And the reason I say that we're approaching the chasm is because we're already seeing a little bit of a mix of both, right? A year ago, everybody coming on board to goimagine knew we were brand new. I think everybody coming on board with us knew, hey, this company is a flyer. They just came out. There's probably things they got to work on. And we were working on things, right? But we got a lot of grace from those early makers because, you know, they knew we were brand new. Well, now I want to say over the past couple months, we're seeing more makers come on board that are now hearing about us, but are expecting maybe we're further down the line than we are yet, right? They're the early majority that you see on the chart here that are maybe expecting that every kink is worked out, every bug is worked out. We're as good as we're going to be because this is what we're coming out with. And the chasm is trying to make that leap. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is making that chasm leap, right? And a lot of that is coming down to technology and some of the upgrades we're making. Because I'll be quite frank, and I'll be very clear with everybody here. Our product, when I say our product, our website is not as good as it should be yet. It's not, you know. I'm fine saying that because of the stage we're at in the company. I don't think it's fast enough. We've got to work on speed issues. I mean, it works, but it's not fast enough. I think there's a lot of branding and a lot of ways that the site works right now that can be refined. There's also a lot of things, a lot of components I want to add into the website. I want to add some more social features, some more video features. I think there's a lot of things that we can make the site more modern by doing it, right? So this is where I'm trying to focus on what are the things we can do to get past that innovator stage of people just wanting to be in it for the mission and get to the stage of people being in it because we're providing every service they could possibly want, right? And so what I want to talk about today is how we're going to do it, what our ideas are to do it, and also ideally I would like your feedback on it, because one of the things that I hope everybody recognizes as I talk today is that must be technical gremlins. I'm seeing your things. Hold on a second. Everyone, hello. I'm seeing messages here. It's not working for me. It says it will start soon. Huh. Hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? So I think I had a technical glitch. I am live now. I thought I was live a moment ago, but I clearly wasn't. I want to make sure I'm live here. I'm live now. Can you see me? I think I was talking to nobody there for a few minutes. So I apologize to everybody about that. Let's see here. View on YouTube. I'm just making sure I'm all set up. Did you guys hear anything I was saying earlier, or was just saying? I'm laughing now with you. Could you hear anything before? I was talking by myself. All right. I am going to start back at the beginning, everybody. I'm so sorry. Nothing until just now for me. All right. Hey, let me remove this. What's up, everybody? I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm sorry that I'm late. I actually have been talking for probably about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'm now seeing that nobody was hearing me. So I appreciate everybody's patience now that I've shown up. But hey, I'm here. So thank you. Let me first start by welcoming everybody to our new office. This is our new fancy space, and right now there is nothing behind me. You see nothing but a white wall. And Steph Romke, who many of you know, who is much more of a stylist than I am, has promised that she's going to help me make a better background than what I have today, since right now it quite frankly is just is nothing behind me. But I am excited because we are out of my house. For the past 2 years, like most of the pandemic world, I've been working out of my house as we've gotten goimagine off the ground. We started goimagine smack dab during the pandemic, so we had never had an office. And now that the world's opening back up, we did get a small space. I'll give you a quick tour of where we are. Here we are in beautiful Worcester, Massachusetts. We are in the art district of Worcester. You can only see one of the murals here, but there are really cool art murals all over the community we're in right now. There's downstairs is Arts Worcester. Upstairs is a really cool maker space called Technocopia, which does a lot of different things. Here is our office in here. We've got some space. Steph will eventually be coming in as well. There's Steph's eventual desk, but she's not here yet. And I am just excited to have a reason to leave my house. And for those who don't know, I do have 4 children, 2 of which are 4-year-old twins. So over the past 2 years, when I was trying to work from home and my kids were home, it always was difficult. So now that I am here in our own office, I hopefully will get even more productive than I've been the past 2 years. So, yeah, Linda says you need some makers art to decorate the space. You know, Linda, we actually already discussed that. So I was talking to Steph today, and we're going to be getting things off goimagine and making our entire office look a little more homey than right now being, 4 beige walls. But that is going to be the goal of making it look a little more nice to live in. Let me start by introducing myself. We, as you all know, are growing. We have more and more makers joining us every day. And so that means a lot of the makers who might be watching this haven't seen my past webinars. You can always go back into the archives. I've been doing webinars for the past 2 years. But for those that are new, my name is Jon Lincoln. I am the founder of goimagine. And I'm excited you're here for maybe the first webinar you're watching. I have not done one for a little while. Quite frankly, it's because we've been working. We've had a lot going on in the background that we're going to be talking about. But for those that are new, let me go ahead and share my screen and talk a little bit about first who we are and what our mission is. I'm sure you already know plenty, hopefully, if you've read our website, but really the reason that goimagine exists is because we're looking to build a more caring economy. We're looking to take what already exists in terms of a marketplace platform, but have it focus on social good. So we're not trying to change the world of technology. We're trying to take what already exists, but just make a better business model out of it. And the way we're doing it is we're doing it through a handmade marketplace, working with makers and artists like yourself. The whole goal here is to prove to the world that a company can be successful focusing on social good instead of Wall Street returns. There is a huge company you've probably heard of already called Newman's Own. It is a salad dressing company. You'll see it in every supermarket, and they've been doing this for 40 years, where they've donated over $500 million to charity. And they created what I would call a conscious capitalism, an ethical company that pays everybody well, but also is focusing its profits on social good and helping children in need. Now, we're doing this to the next degree because, unlike Paul Newman, I am not famous, nor am I rich. So we are really trying to prove the model here through doing it through normal people, right? This model of philanthropy through e-commerce, but doing it with the people. And when I say with the people, I'm talking about you. The reality is this only works when a community comes together and wants to see change in the world, right? They want to see that. I think it's very apparent in the world right now that there's a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of animosity with people for so many different reasons, whether it's because of the decisions the government's making, whether it's social decisions, the left versus the right, genders against each other, or sexuality against each other, religions against each other. There's so many things that are just battling in the world right now. But one thing I think is common for everybody is we want to see it get better. We want to see it progress to be a better world. And so few of us can do anything alone. and the hope for goimagine on our platform, even though we're remote, even though right now we can't see each other, you can see me, I can't see you, we can work together around the country by coming around one common good cause and helping it grow while helping ourselves with our own businesses. So that's really the goal of goimagine. Now, how are we going to get there? Right? We're coming up on 2 years since we first launched our platform. We've consistently been growing, which has been fantastic, but we are hitting some critical points for the company. And that critical point is taking that next leap, right? Up until now, we've been doing what I would call proof of concept. Creating what in the tech world they call a minimum viable product. Just seeing if there's a desire for this. Is there even a desire? Does anybody care? I think what we've seen over the past couple of years is, people really love what we're doing. They really want to see us succeed. But just because people want to see us succeed doesn't mean we will. It also means that we have to keep working hard to do it. And part of that is something I want to talk about called the technology adoption curve. Now, I don't want to get too technical with everybody. I realize that, you're not in the software world. You're all makers and artists. But I think it's important as being part of our community and part of our team growing this company to understand some basics of how we're looking at the growth of our company. And we're going to get into this. When we talk about it's a great book called Crossing the Chasm. I actually have it over here. It's how society adopts technology. And whether it's the iPhone, whether it was Facebook, whether it was desktop computers 30 years ago, whether it was the internet, which we're on right now, all technology has adopted in a very similar way, right? Let's use the internet as an example, right? It always starts with what you would call the innovators and the early adopters. And those are the people that geek out on what's being sold. When I say geek out, is they're just excited about what it is. They don't care that it's buggy. They don't care that the company's still figuring it out. They don't care that recalls might happen or anything like that. They just love the concept, love the mission. They want to get in. And that was, in this case, the internet in the 90s, the early 90s, when, call it 1991, where really only the extreme geeks were getting involved because it was hard to use, it was hard to get to, but they loved what it was. So they were willing to deal with the fact that it was clunky and it didn't work well yet, right? We're, I think, squarely in this early adopter stage. And what I'll tell you is, ignore this $sign. That shouldn't have been there. We currently have over 3,000 makers on our website, 3,000 makers and artists selling. And I think the majority of our makers, especially the ones that are sticking with us, are in this early adopter or innovator stage. And the reason I say that is because we have a lot of makers that love what we're building. They love the concept. They love the idea of a more philanthropic marketplace. They love the idea of a handmade only marketplace. They love the idea of a platform designed just for handmade that is focusing on social good instead of focusing on Wall Street investors, right? These are the early adopters and innovators that a lot of you that are watching this right now. Now, eventually, as a company grows, you're going to outgrow the early adopters, the ones that are going to deal with the bugs, the ones that are going to deal with the quirkiness, because quite frankly, they're in it for the mission, right? Eventually, you get to the majority of people. And the majority of the ones that are waiting for proof on the product, right? When it comes to the internet, waiting till it was mainstream, until there were websites everywhere, it was easier to use, more easily accessible, right? And in the case of marketplaces, the majority is oftentimes waiting till there's more buyers and sellers, waiting till it's more well-known before they start joining the marketplace. And that's where you see a lot of Etsy, which is quite frankly, might be in this late majority stage right now. Etsy has really topped off where they're huge, the world knows about them, and they got to keep growing as well. Now, we can talk about the fact that part of the problem with rampant capitalism, which I would call it, is that you always have to grow, right? You can't just flatline, you have to go bigger. That's how shareholders get paid. So Etsy cannot see a drop. Now, with technology, there's always a drop because new technology comes out, new things happen, and to keep growing, you have to keep creating new things. So Etsy right now is struggling with maybe keeping the growth going because they've hit that critical mass on the handmade side of things. So the reason a lot of us are seeing Etsy leave handmade, right, is because they got to keep growing, and handmade is only so big, right? So in our case, we're still at the very early stage, and we're coming up into what's called the chasm. And without getting bleak, the chasm is where a lot of companies fail. That's just the reality. And that's because they can't get over the stage of the early adopters to the majority, right? All the ones that love the mission and love the early product, yes, they're still on board, but you can never get to that critical mass because maybe the product hasn't advanced far enough to make it known or make it easy enough for the majority to want to use it, right? So what we're going to talk about today is that chasm and some of the ideas we have on how we're going to get to the next stage. How are we going to get to the majority so we see a lot of rampant growth? And I've got some ideas I want to share with you as we go through this. Let me see if there's any comments or any messages that I've going on here. All right. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about funding. Let's talk about money and how we're going to do this. Now, I'm going to talk about Etsy. I'm going to talk about their funding. I'm going to talk about venture capitalists. I'm going to talk about how traditional software companies fund themselves and how goimagine is doing it completely different. We are going to fund ourselves and are continuing to fund ourselves not through the traditional software route, because funding traditionally means going to venture capitalists, going to high-tech investors, which eventually push you to go public with an IPO on the stock market, which is driven completely by returns, and company after company in the world have lost their way and lost their original mission because of funding from the wrong people, right? And now I will tell you that I'm not anti-capitalist. I want to be very clear here. This isn't us versus capitalism. I'm actually very pro-capitalism, but I'm very pro what I would call conscious capitalism. Capitalism to really drive the economy without taking advantage of the economy. Now let's talk about Etsy and their growth and something I've talked about before, which I think a lot of makers don't realize. So what you see here is the funding of Etsy over the course of 2005 when they launched up until 2012. And then after that, they went to Wall Street and had their big IPO, and they're now on the stock exchange. So they started off with $400,000, which is a good seed round. That was enough to get the site going and built up. And then quickly after that, 2006. Now keep in mind, they launched in 2005. 1 year later in 2006, they took investment from Union Square Ventures. You can all look up Union Square Ventures. You can learn more about them. They've invested in companies like Coinbase or Twitter. But one thing about venture capital firms is that when they invest in you, they're investing in you with the expectation of a hopefully 10x return. They don't do it because they're philanthropic. They do it because they want their money back, and they don't do it for the mission. They do it for the money, right? And then right after 2006, they invested $1 million. A year later, they invested another $3.2 million. And then a year after that, they brought in other venture capital firms. So on top of Union Square Ventures, you saw Excel Venture Capital, Acton Venture Capital, all come on board. And that's where in 2008, they had a $27 million round. Huge amount of money, right? And then it continues from there. Now, Etsy has been hugely successful. One thing that I should say frustrates me, but one of the things that upsets me is a lot of makers who joined Etsy in the early days thinking they were joining a maker mission because of how Etsy presented itself, only to later find out really Etsy was in it for the money, or for the eventual IPO. And again, nothing's wrong with it from Etsy's standpoint. I think they've been a tremendous company. But I will say that for those who joined in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, a lot of these early makers really felt they were joining a kitschy site for them. right? They were joining a site made for handmade artists. And that was true. I think the mission of Etsy was that when it started. And it could stay that way for the first decade because the growth was so fast in the handmade world that, yeah, they're all handmade, right? The problem I think that happened with Etsy was when they started to outgrow handmade, right? So let's say Etsy's a $2 billion company. No, I'm sorry. Let's say the handmade space is $2 billion. And Etsy wants to become a $10 billion company. Well, how can you become a $10 billion company if the niche you're in is only worth $2 billion? The only way to do it is to outgrow your niche, right? So what you saw was they grew really big in handmade and all the artists loved them. But then around 2012, when they started to peter with sales, even though they were hundreds of millions of dollars, they had to keep growing. So then they started allowing production partners. They said, well, let's bring in manufacturing. And I think that's where you started to see Etsy open the floodgates up to manufacturing. And then they started increasing their fees because, of course, they got to keep their bottom line going up, especially leading up to their IPO. And if you look back at who Etsy was at the beginning, anyone who looked at the funding would have seen from 2006, they were headed to where they are today, right? This was always going to be where Etsy ended up because you can follow the money. And I think I apologize for rambling here. For those who know me, you know what I do. But I think my overall point, what I'm trying to say is that when you look at supporting any company, follow the money. Because whatever a company says on the marketing front, ooh, we're socially conscious, we have a big heart, we're helping the world, right? Well, a lot of times it can be marketing, but you got to look at who's running it, where they're getting their funding, right? It's similar to, if when you vote for someone, as a politician. And I don't want to get political here. This is my point. I don't care, right, blue, red, purple, whatever you are. The same thing is true. If a politician comes up and says, I'm all for the environment, I care about the environment, but then you go to their funding sources and you see that oil companies are the only people funding them, well, should we trust what they're saying, or should we look at where they're getting funding from? Should we look at who's behind them? Is their campaign manager the ex-CEO of Exxon, right? So so it's all about whether it's companies, whether it's politicians, follow the money. And with Etsy, if you follow the money, you could have seen in 2006, you could have written the story of where they would be today, assuming they were successful, of what they were going to do, right? And that's where I'm trying to hit home here on how goimagine is different and how we're thinking about things differently, but how that also brings up different challenges. So let's talk about goimagine's funding up until today, because it's been 2 years. Well, in January 2020, we started with my credit card. I think much like all of you who started your own businesses, it usually starts with your credit card. You say, I've got an idea. I'm going to buy some stuff and hope it works. So the company started on my credit card. But soon after that, I, of course, had to find some money to really keep this going and start growing further, especially the website. So in December of 2020, we did a crowdfunding campaign. Some of you who are listening here might have been part of it, and I can't thank you enough because it's because of you that we're even to where we are today. But what we did is we did a crowdfunding campaign in WeFunder where we raised from 87 individual makers and artists $52,000. And if any of you want to see the original crowdfunding campaign, if you just go to, let me bring it up here, wefunder.com/goimagine, you can see the original crowdfunding campaign where we raised that $52,000 and a little bit about that original mission and how we brought that money in. And now we are paying this back as a 1.5 times return to all of our funders. We've already paid back, I think, probably around $10,000 of that. And of course, we're going to keep paying that back until we pay back our 87 investors with their 1.5 times return. So we raised $52,000 there. And then we raised another $50,000 through our Facebook Community Accelerator grant. We were lucky enough last year where Facebook saw what we were doing. We applied for what's called the Community Accelerator grant, and they gave us the $50,000 grant. So before you ask, Facebook doesn't have ownership in us. It was more Facebook, which I very much appreciate, liking our cause and putting in some money towards it. So to date, we're about $102,000 in funding, plus Jon's credit card. So I don't know, call that $130,000 of funding, which was a great amount to get us started, right? I think that $100,000 got our platform built up, got some marketing going, and really greased the wheels where we're at. But now we're looking at our next stage. And this is where I'm opening up to our community to also discuss, how we're funding, some ideas we have on funding, and who we're going out to for funding. And this all starts with also, I want to be very clear what our goal is within the company, and that is to bring in the makers further as shared owners. Before you ask, this isn't going down the path where I'm saying, give me money to be an owner. That's not, we're going down the path of all makers being owners in the company by us giving equity to our makers. So in the spirit of that, I'm coming to you today, also talking to you as our partners. All of you right now that are a member in goimagine will eventually be owners in goimagine as well. I will tell you that I've already talked to some lawyers on drawing up the paperwork in terms of creating a model of shared ownership. And we're looking at about a $10,000 legal charge, I'll call it, to go through the official paperwork, which we're going to do. I'm not in a position right now to want to spend the $10,000 to go through the legal rigmarole. My goal here is that when we reach our next stage of funding, will also coincide with when we give ownership to our makers and artists, right? So all the active makers will be owners. So I'm talking to you today as if you already are an owner, knowing that we don't have the funding yet to want to get through the paperwork of it, but still we're going to get there. Now, what does shared ownership mean? Well, first thing is we're going to have it so that makers and artists on goimagine will have board representation, right? When we grow a little further and we formally have a board, and by the way, I haven't seen any messages for a minute, so if anyone's listening, just let me know. Just chat here to say you can still hear me. I want to make sure my internet didn't go out or anything. We really want to focus on giving board representation because we want our makers and artists to have someone on the inside who can see everything we're doing, right? We want to be transparent with everything because as much as I'm in a webinar now as the founder of goimagine telling you what's going on, I also realize that I just told you a second ago, don't trust what people say. Follow the money, follow the decision makers, see what's happening in the background. So I want to walk the walk and talk the talk, which means we are going to give ownership where there will be board representation that the members will eventually vote on to have someone on our board. With that, there will be voting rights within the community. So you can vote on supermajority issues as we make major decisions in the company. There will be voting rights for the makers. Make sure this didn't break out because I think it's still going. I think it is. Yeah, I just want to make sure you guys. Okay, great. I think the biggest thing here is also giving the makers and artists influence in the company. Now, I'd like to think that you guys already know you have influence, right? I'd like to think that the amount of times I've come live, that how active we are in the community and maker circle and on Facebook, the amount of times we ask for your feedback, that hopefully you all already know that you're involved. But I think that there is a point of shared ownership that is real, that really lets us show our dedication to you, right? So my hope is that as we get to that point of giving ownership to all active makers and creating a structure where there's voting rights, board representation, and more formal influence in the company, my hope is that makers and artists will start to realize that goimagine is in it for them, right? goimagine is in it for the right reasons. Because the reality is the more makers that support us, the more we can do for makers. We've talked about this before, but again, there's probably people here who are seeing me for the first time, and I want to really continue to reinforce, there's the word I'm looking for, reinforce the idea that as we grow, we are not going to take money from the wrong people. We want to take money from the right people. So what does that mean in terms of funding and how we're going to do it? This is the big question. And I'm going to tell you some of the things I've been working on in terms of funding and how we're going to get there. We are in a very unique position. And that unique position is the fact that we are a company that donates all of our profits to charity. How can a company raise funding if their goal is to give all the money to charity, right? Because traditionally, an investor says, great, I'm going to invest $1 million in you, and eventually I'll own that equity. And when you sell the company in 10 years, I'll get $10 million back, right? But if equity in our company doesn't come with dividends and doesn't come with profit sharing, how does an investor make their money? So there's a couple ideas we have. One is I've already started working on revenue share model. And we actually, going back to the We Funder I just talked about, we already did this the first time around as a concept towards it. So for any of those who invest in our We Funder, you should have already received payments back. Make sure if you haven't seen them, log into your We Funder account. You're getting paid back for what you invested. And I hope to see those paybacks going faster and faster. So in the next couple of years, you'll be fully paid back with interest. So now we're looking for the funders who are willing to take that same idea, but maybe raising more money because we want to get a few $100,000 in our raise. So one way is going to angel investors who have philanthropic hearts and say, hey, listen, Mr. Investor, we realize that normally you would invest in a company for equity and that equity would eventually cash out years from now. But what if instead of the equity, we paid you back on a revenue share so that you still got the same return? You put in $100,000, you got back $500,000 or whatever that number might be, right? Whether it was $100,000 for equity and that equity eventually cashed out when you sold it for 500 grand, or that 100 grand was for a revenue share, which paid back over the course of years 500 grand. At the end of the day, I would like to think that money is money. You put in X, you got Y. The mechanism, whether it's equity or revenue share, shouldn't matter. Now, interestingly enough, it does matter to some people. And the reason I say that is I've actually had meetings with venture capital firms, right? VC firms. I've talked to them. And I've offered the revenue share model because equity in our company is not going to earn back the return that an investor would want. And I want to make sure we retain ownership in the goimagine so that we will always be true to our mission. Because as soon as you sell off equity to the other owners, those other owners might have different ideas for the company than the founders, and in this case, our makers and artists have for it. So 1A is a revenue share going out to philanthropic impact investors that not only get behind our mission, but want to make a return. The other way we can raise funding is I've already talked to a company called the Impact Foundation, and they have already approved us to work with them. Now, the Impact Foundation is an interesting one because what the Impact Foundation does is they work with socially good companies to allow you to bring in tax-free, call it donations, that you would then pay back to a charity. So let's talk about the money flow here and how that even works. There are philanthropists out there that are writing checks for philanthropic causes anyway. They're not looking for money as a return. They're cutting checks to foundations they believe in, whether it's St. Jude's or Boys and Girls Club, whatever it might be. And a lot of these more wealthy individuals cut a check every year for a few $100,000 just to help the world, right? But when they do it, they're getting their deductions, the tax-free deductions for charitable giving. So there is a benefit to them in the fact that it's tax-free. Now, because we are a for-profit company donating profits to charity, we can't take tax-free donations ourselves. If someone gave us $100,000, it would be after-tax money. Through the Impact Foundation, that's not the case. Through the Impact Foundation, somebody can donate to us $100,000 or $200,000 to support our mission. But within that mechanism, we would have to guarantee that we are going to pay back that money to a charity so that it flows philanthropically to a 501c3, right? I've been toying with this idea because of finding the right philanthropist, whether it's an individual or a company, quite frankly. Large companies donate a lot. So we can approach the bigger companies in the world. I mean, call it the Apples, the Googles, or whoever that has big foundations. They're giving money away to help the world. Maybe we can convince them to say, donate $200,000 to us, of which it goes back, we pay back that plus interest to the charity of your choice. So this is another way we can potentially raise money. So there's kind of two different ways I'm looking at us raising money. There is the raising philanthropic dollars through someone who wants to give tax-free money that is then paid back to the charity of their choice. The other would be maybe giving a return on their money through a revenue share. This can also happen again through crowdfunding. You know, I've not ruled out the idea of crowdfunding again. Where we were at years ago versus where we're at today, we have a lot more makers, a lot more followers. So while we were able to raise $52,000 a couple of years ago, maybe we can raise a few $100,000 this time to get that next funding round. I do want to tell you all that this is not uncommon. You know, when I say not uncommon, all companies go through different funding rounds because as they grow, they need an influx of cash to push to the next level. So what are we doing with this cash? What are we going to do with our next funding? So let's pretend we got the funding. Let's pretend that us as a community work together. We all have our connections, and we all figured out how are we going to get the funding. Once we have the funding, there are specifically two things I want to do with it. The first is I want to build out our platform to be more modern. The platform today works. It works okay. But it's not as modern as it should be. We need our mobile app to get complete, both a mobile app for sellers and a mobile app for buyers. Our site needs to be more modern and faster, and it needs more, quite frankly, AI, artificial intelligence, to create custom experiences for buyers. The seller dashboard we already have running, which I'll give you a glimpse into in a moment. The new seller dashboard we're already developing, but it's going to take time to get that out the door. So if we bring in funding, we can build out much faster. We can meet the demands of that early majority in terms of technology if we get the funding to build out the platform. How often do you see in these groups, when's the mobile app going to come out, right? Or when's this function going to come out? When's that feature going to come out? Well, a lot of when you hear that, that's the majority talking. That's the ones saying, hey, when's the, and rightfully they want it, everybody wants it. That's the ones that are expecting all these things. So we need to get the funding to build up faster and get there. The other thing with funding is marketing, right? We want to get more known. I'd love to invest more into PR. I'd love to invest more into marketing dollars to get more buyers coming to the marketplace. And that's also where funding is going to go. So for this meeting of our next stage of growth, I think I just wanted to open up to all of our community and talk about this for a moment. The idea of where we're at and that we are now going into a stage of funding. Right? Funding again to get us to that next level of growth. If you're curious, I will show a little bit of this. Our new seller dashboard is coming along, and I hope to have this out later this year. We have our developer working on it right now. I've given glimpses of this before in terms of our new product, our new dashboard. Featured products is now ready in our new dashboard where you can assign featured products, drag and drop the order of the products within the system. We have shop categories available now. This is fully functioning where you can create your own custom categories in the new seller dashboard. Stripe is now connected in the new seller dashboard. I'm showing this so that everybody can see that we're not sitting idle. We have more development happening, and the new seller dashboard is making progress. The messages is going to get completed soon, and as these each get completed, we're getting inching closer to having our new seller dashboard out the door. But you know, a little more funding would get us a lot further and a lot faster in terms of what we're building. So I guess I'll finish up today saying that I wanted to open up to everyone on where we're at and what we're thinking, right? Let me even move this off. We are moving into the next stage of goimagine in terms of growth. Right? I think we've proven the concept. We know people want this. We know there's demand for this. We know there's a market for this. We can taste the opportunity. So now we need to work on the funding to take it to the next level, right? To find the people out there that are willing to go along for the ride and still get a benefit for it, whether that means a philanthropic benefit or a money return. So over the next 6 months, I'm going to be working very hard on this funding. If anybody out there has ideas, connections, thoughts around funding, I am all ears. I mean, hell, I have a dream that if we got, a few 100,000 makers on Etsy to each give us $10, we would be blowing the site up immediately, right? So it's not even a lot of money, but it's just finding the people to take the risk on supporting a venture like ours. So with that said, I don't know if there's any more questions yet. And Jennifer, thank you. I know some of you are probably more than happy to want to invest some, and we may or may not take you up on that. And what I mean by that is we really need to think through the strategy in getting the right funding. Because I never want to do something that puts any of our makers in a bad position. I would never want someone to invest in us where it was like, whether they pay their mortgage or not, anything we take investment on would definitely be a payback, which we're already doing with WeFunder, and some of you will be getting more payments coming soon. And I'm just thinking out loud, but I don't know if a crowdfunding campaign, but a bigger one than last time. Because last time we did a WeFunder, but it was small. It was just within our community. We really didn't blow it up. Should we do something much bigger this time for the handmade world? Crowdfund a lot bigger. And maybe we can raise a few $100,000 to really blow this up. And I can put together the business plans. I can even show everyone, I've already got it, on how we're going to build out the platform bigger. I mean, these are all the things running through my head. And Jennifer, I'm sorry. I looked at your comment. I started to babble, but thank you, Jennifer. I'm not concerned with getting there. I really think we're going to get there. I think we got to figure out the best strategy to do so. And I would love to continue brainstorming with all of you on that best strategy, because we're in this together, and we're all going to achieve this dream together. And all of you will be equity owners once we get to that next stage, so that we can formally give shared ownership and involve all of our makers. But with that said, thank you for your time today. I plan on coming back again probably in a few weeks. I want to go over more of what's in development, what we're doing in development, so you understand that side of things. So thank you for your time. I hope I didn't babble too much today, and I will see you on the on Maker Circle and Facebook. So everyone have a wonderful week and a happy 4th of July. Bye, everybody.